Chapter 2. The Little Girl. Looking around the cold and moldy basement at what a week ago had been everyday Americans created a strong sense of sadness. Seeing them now reminded him of refugees fleeing a war-torn country, only this time it was his own. Officer Blankenship had aided the people of St. Louis for most of his life and knew nothing else but to protect and serve. He shook his head at the thought of protecting and serving them now as automatic gunfire and explosions filled the morning, shaking an endless supply of dust from the rafters. Throughout his time with the police department, he clearly noticed a decline in society as he watched people vote themselves more and more handouts from the government. But this was beyond what he had imagined. Civil war or a revolution, maybe, but not mixed with an invasion. Leaning against the basement wall, he thought back to what had occurred over the last week. How he was driving back to the precinct after patrolling the streets since early morning, listening to the scanner. Listening as personnel from the Strong Cities Network, a branch of the United Nations, enforced martial law and called for backup as they entered homes and confiscated weapons. How at that point he wanted nothing more than to quit, but knew he could do more to help citizens as long as he still wore the badge. That was until the flash changed everything. With the flash, every car on the highway, including his own, had stopped running. As he sat motionless, fruitlessly turning the key in the ignition, explosions began all around him. One by one, he watched from the safety of his car as power cables sparked, and the transformers that stored the power high on poles exploded into brilliant balls of fire. The city looked as if it were being carpet-bombed by 100 bombers, yet he sat and watched as, one after another, they exploded all around him. After a minute, something caught his attention in the rearview mirror. As he turned to get a better look, he began to wonder if they were in fact being attacked. His eyes opened wide and his pupils dilated at the sight of the large aircraft closing in. Not wanting to stick around for it to drop its bombs, he quickly unbuckled his seatbelt and shoved the door of his squad car open. After exiting, time seemed to stand still. He looked around at the cars full of people, filled with fear. "Run! Run!" he screamed as he pointed behind them. Yet they only stared at him as if he were a crazy man holding a sign preaching the end is near. A short distance ahead, he focused on the overpass as he ran, thinking it might provide him with a little safety when the bombs fell. He ran as the explosions continued near to far, all the while screaming, "Run! Get out of your cars and run!" Few were able to hear him through their windows as they hid from the exploding transformers, lying as far down in their cars as they could. Those who had seen what he had left the false safety of their vehicles and began to run in his direction. Just ahead, he watched a little girl struggling to keep up as her overweight parents urged her to run. He glanced back and saw that the aircraft was even larger and lower than before. The question of why a bomber would be so low raced through his mind as he got closer to the couple who were in no shape to run. Knowing they were not going to make it, he reached out as he neared the little girl. Feet away from her, he took in a deep breath, and at the top of his vocal capabilities screamed, "Hey!" As the confused little girl turned, he lifted her from the ground, dragging her forward as her mother's meaty fingers released their tired grip. The girl screamed as he ran, and he held her tight. He didn't know if her fear was due to him snatching her from her mother, or the sight of the aircraft. Officer Blankenship wasn't going to stop and find out. Even though he was in considerably good shape, he could feel his thigh muscles burning as he ran under the overpass to the other side. Behind him, he heard the sounds of twisting metal as the aircraft neared. Without looking, he broke from those running down the highway and ran up the far side, hoping to use the overpass as protection. No sooner had he covered the girl with his body, placing her between the concrete and himself, than he felt the heat of intense flames rush past. As he shielded the screaming little girl, he looked back from underneath his arm. The sight was one he wished he hadn't seen. The aircraft hadn't dropped bombs, but had crashed. What he saw was an ocean of flames, cars and people as they all mixed together. When he was sure that the worst was over for now, he looked down at the crying little girl. Not knowing what to do, he brushed the dirt-filled hair from her face. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Too shaken by what had just taken place, she only cried, At least she can still do that, he thought. As he looked around for the girl's parents, he had no illusions as to their current state, as more people than he could count lay burning or mortally wounded. His first thought was to assist them, but it wasn't a sight he wanted the girl to see, and he knew he had to get more help. Reaching up to the radio strapped to his shoulder, he hit the mic and heard no reply as he called, "Dispatch?" There was no static, not even a little spark of life. Pulling his cell phone from his pocket, he swiped his finger across the screen to activate it. Again, nothing. Looking down to the highway, he saw the remains of a sign and the red lettering of the word Airlines. Then it clicked. All the events of the last 5 minutes came together, and he said aloud, "EMP."